All right, it's time to talk about one of my absolute favorite subjects, which is science. And a lot of times Christians nowadays are not associated with science, or that we're some backwards, archaic group that can't understand the magnitude of what we've been discovering. That the earth is billions of years old, the universe is billions of years old. And life here, the evolutionary process, has been going on for millions, if not billions of years. Now, Darwin came out in 18 somethings, don't remember the exact date, and he talked about survival of the fittest, he talked about evolution. And in my opinion, this is a perfect fit with the Word, it's a perfect fit with the Bible. And a lot of Christians threw it out immediately because he connected evolution with human beings. And that's where I take issue with Darwin as well. Human beings are separate. We were made in God's image. We were not part of an evolutionary process. But we've been on the planet for millions of years. Adam in particular, if you read Genesis and you take it as the blueprint for how everything went, it matches up with modern science. And I've written a book on this. It's very complicated and I don't have time to go into it here. But some of the truths that I've discovered is that Adam was here for millions of years. Eve came later. But during that time where Adam was here, it talks about in Genesis that the animals were all named by Adam. And if you watch, like, I don't know, some of these kid cartoons, it says that all the animals showed up one day and then Adam just named them all. And that's just not the case. Through this evolutionary process, the animals were brought to Adam as they changed. And if you read God's reasoning for this, he was looking for a partner for Adam. So it stands to reason that the evolutionary process in apes would have went on to, let's say, Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon would have come out of that, because the essence of what God was doing was searching for a suitable partner for Adam over millions of years. Well, he finally got to a point where he said, there is no suitable partner in the animal world. He did not destroy Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, and all of these higher end, animals or evolutionized apes, so to speak. And then he created Eve from Adam. So evolution is a perfect fit for what the Bible talks about. I just think as Christians, we have looked at it incorrectly for a long time. And like I said, there's a lot of research that went into this. There's a lot of fact and a lot of misconception that got thrown out to come to these conclusions. But I can't talk about it today. What I want to talk about is the curse of Darwin when applied to human beings. We as human beings are set apart. We set up societies based on principle. We base them on equality. We base them on, higher order. We have the emotion of God, the laughter of God, the creativity of God, the wisdom imparted of God. Even in the Tower of Babel, when we were all working together for, with one language, God looked down and said, uh-oh, they'll be up here in the stars in no time, and, took out our languages. We were never part of the animal kingdom. We were here to be fruitful and multiply, and to fill and subdue the earth. Those were our two original commands when we were created. And the fact that we have applied what Darwin realized as fact in the animal world and the plant world, and then applied it to us, we have now taken on this curse of not being made in God's image, but actually being made in animal image, that we are, just this evolutionary product. We are a slave to our instincts. We have to live in the moment. And that animal life is on the same plane as human life. And it was never supposed to be that way. Animals live right where they're at. They hunt in packs. They attack the weak. They have sex with anything that moves or is willing. And as we've accepted this Darwin view of humankind, we have moved more in an animalistic direction, whether that's preying on the weak, whether that's never taking responsibility for what we're doing and blaming our instinct, or, we've got to have sex with something all the time. God called us and created us to be able to function above what he created, to rule it appropriately, and he gave us the faculties for that. Now we are regressing and taking the curse of Darwin and becoming what was supposed to be ruled. And it comes with all kinds of consequences. This curse separates us from God. It doesn't allow us to look at ourselves with any kind of distinction or a commitment to truth finding or principles or holding ourselves to a higher standard and self-control, and forming societies not based on necessity, but based on a higher principled order that God lays out in his word. The truth of God's word and the order that he puts there for us, we are the only ones that can live it. Animals cannot live it. They can't understand it. They can't fathom it. We can set up societies and forms of government that are completely based on how God knew we would be happy. And now that we're throwing out our distinction, that we're throwing out us being made in God's image, and that search for truth, and that search for our connection with God, and how we form ourselves, how we live, and how our societies function to attain what he gave us to attain, you just see us digressing. And unfortunately, you can see ever since the Curse of Darwin really came out, there was a huge digression with, millions being slaughtered, people being looked at as animals instead of people. It's a dehumanizing philosophy that allows human beings to adopt the survival of the fittest mentality and destroy one another and destroy each other because you don't matter. You're not made in God's image. You're just this ball of flesh, another animal. In fact, we've gotten to a point now where some people consider animal life to be more sacred and a higher order than human life. We have to break this curse of Darwin over humankind. We have to reject that we're just some random evolution on this planet that just happened to pop out of apes, and that we are doomed and, constrained by the same thinking, the same instinctually based, necessity-based, social structures that animals have. We've seen societies do this. The Nazis, the Mao in China, the communist Russians, these totalitarian, crazy regimes that then take certain parts of the population and put them on the animal level, take away their distinction of being created in God's image, and wipe them out, torture them, and basically apply the mantra of survival of the fittest. But you know what the big problem with thinking that way is? And you can see it in all these societies. When you adopt the survival of the fittest, the animal mentality, the most ruthless, nasty, horrible, cutthroat leaders emerge as the winner. They go to the top of the social order. And if you're going to compete, if you're going to stay alive, you must become stronger, more vicious, more terrible than them. It is the removal of a principled society where everyone has value. And it is the adoption of, we're all animals, and if I can kill you and get away with it, I'm going to do so. Now, we may think we've arrived and we won't make these same mistakes again, but as long as this curse of Darwin remains on us, whatever forms of government take place, no matter how much we think we've arrived, that same principle of survival of the fittest will apply to human beings, and it will have a terrible cost, especially on the most vulnerable amongst us. Look no further than the 50, 60 million aborted children in the United States. The most vulnerable suffer the most. What's next? Our elderly, if we have state-run health care, if that comes to be, those amongst us who are the most vulnerable and the most costly will get cut out. As long as we see this as survival of the fittest, and if I'm more fit than you, you have to go or you can be marginalized, used, or killed, we're in trouble as a society. So we must reject this curse of Darwin. We must put the truth back in us that we are made in God's image, that there is a way to live that He laid down for us, and it is the unique human capacity to love, to serve, and to put those weaker than ourselves above us, to serve those who don't have what we have. And this serve, love, human quality that no other animal can do is what's going to change the world. But we have to reject the curse of Darwin. Reject it with me. Don't throw the baby out with the bath and say, it doesn't apply to animals and plants and all that stuff, because that's not true. And that's why a lot of Christians will either leave the faith or accept that the human beings fit into the same Darwin mold because they can't separate the two. I'm telling you, you can. Human beings are a separate case from what happened to the rest of the world, and we need to reject the curse of Darwin over our lives and humankind in general and start living like we were made in God's image. We can do it together.